What's up, guys? Chuck and Jayhawk here on a beautiful Saturday. Hopefully, this little four gamer can take us away from the misery of this football game a little bit. We just got an interesting tidbit right now. Joel Embiid is now questionable for today, and that's after Tobias Harris is already out, the Anthony Melton's already out, so we were already going to be targeting the Sixers. But this might be a big deal because as we know, midday Q tags are never good. Most of the time, the player does end up sitting. They're playing Utah. Utah's not like a terrible team, but they're not great, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he did end up sitting. But Jayhawk, how we doing?
Yeah, doing good, man. Coming off pretty good slate last night. Pivoted to a lot of low on Magic late, so that kind of helped me carried me to the cash slate. But yeah, doing good. Pretty fun slate today. You obviously have football, but yeah, looking to bounce back here with some good basketball.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just talking to someone about with this Embiid news specifically. Are we setting any rules for the Sixers? How are we handling some of the cheaper guys? And now, if we get news that Embiid is ruled out, and this game starts a half hour after lock, I'd think that we have the news. We have an hour until lock, so I think we have the news before then. But if Embiid ends up out, then kind of like all the rules I was working on just kind of go out the window, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be Paul Reed season, right? No Embiid. What's his price? He should be. Is he still priced up?
Paul Reed. Let's take a look over at Philly. I wasn't even thinking about him today because he wasn't going to matter. But yeah, 5,700 and 5,600. It'll be interesting to see if his ownership updates to something close to what he actually ends up coming in at. But I'm gonna have to take a look at this and see how I feel about him.
Yeah, that's a pretty stiff price tag. I thought they would lower him a little bit, but guess not.
And I was already interested in Tyrese Maxey a lot, and if Embiid ends up out, then I'm probably just going to play a bunch more Maxi. We were talking a little bit before the stream started how point guard's kind of a difficult decision today, and I'm really only playing Maxi, Brunson, and then trying to figure out how much McConnell I want to play.
Yeah, I mean Maxi, there's already no Melton, and now they're down Harris. Like he should do everything if Embiid's out tonight for Philly. I already think he's a great play with Embiid in. So if he's out, I mean, I think I might just almost lock one Maxi with how bad guard is.
And if that happens, I'm wondering how much the field is going to be getting there because last time Embiid was out, Maxi, I think he had two bad games in a row, and then he finally kind of went off in that third one. But I'm going to have no problem rolling him out. Like I said, Utah is not a team that we fear at all at any position, and so Tyrese Maxey probably going to be one of my higher owned studs tonight. And then after that, I mean, Kelly Oubre, he's like the premier boomer bust player in the NBA, right? This dude put up like 26 fantasy points in the first quarter the other night. I think he finished with like 31 or 32. But we're going to be pretty interested in today, especially with Tobias Harris out. It's just if Embiid's out, there's so much usage to go around, and we know that he doesn't mind shooting the basketball. So it's just a matter of him staying on the court. But before we get into the rest of the slate, I mean, I think this is going to end up being a pretty important part. What of the other Philadelphia players, the cheaper guys, should we be looking at the most?
Yeah, I think with no Harris, I think Marcus Morris looks really good here. Really cheap price point. I think looks like pretty solid value. And then with Embiid out, I think we should see even more of him. So really like Morris for value for Philly.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And in terms of the other like injury stuff on the slate, so we mentioned TJ McConnell because Bruce Brown and Nemhard are out. It looks like Aaron Naismith is on track to play. Celtics look like they're fully healthy today. I'm pretty sure Horford's in, Porzingis in, everyone's playing. For the Knicks, we still just have Mitchell Robinson. We were talking to before the stream. Isaiah Hartenstein is a big part of our exposures right now. We'll see if that becomes even more prominent if Embiid gets ruled out. For the Wizards, Landry Shamet is out. Shouldn't affect too much. Maybe it's a few more minutes for Delon Wright, though. I've been kind of interested in him at his low price the last couple of slates. Utah is fully healthy, and the other guys are mostly fully healthy. The Rockets are still missing Dylan Brooks, and Tari Eason got ruled out today, so it should be a few more minutes for Jabari Smith. Jayshawn Tate's been starting, and he's been kind of chalky. I know he like super failed last time, I think. So we'll see how interested we are in him. But let's just go ahead and dive into the guards. So we already mentioned Tyrese Maxey is probably going to be a big part of what we're doing. I'm very interested in Jalen Brunson and Julius for that matter. We'll get to him in forwards. But of the other payups, I mean, Tyrese Halliburton's going up against Boston. It's a tougher matchup. Damian Lillard against Houston. We'll throw Jalen Brown in that stud category too. Are we looking at any of these other guys?
Yeah, you mentioned Brunson earlier. I really like Brunson here. Everyone against Washington seems to be a trend here. The last 2 games Cleveland did blow them out, but I think New York, playing slower pace should be able to keep it a game here. I mean, Washington should be able to keep a game with New York here. So really like Brunson up top along with Maxi. And then I want to mention Halliburton because I know it is a tougher matchup, but he's only 9.9K. The dude has been putting up unreal numbers. I think in the past 5 games, he's had like 12 plus assists in like 3 out of the 5. So like he's been playing insane. So I think he's worth exposure in tournaments as well.
Yeah, I mean, Halliburton might be the greatest point guard to ever live. These are unreal stats. He's captaining the best offense in NBA history. And so, regardless of we play Halliburton, I think we should still be pretty interested in this Boston Indiana game. We know that when teams play Indiana, it's usually a pretty good boost for the best players on the opposite team. And so I'll say Damian Lillard is probably an okay pivot off of Jalen Brunson given the ownership disparity, and their prices are very similar. We have them pretty much the same in the OF index. You know, Brunson gets a slight advantage, but I think we want to mix in Damian Lillard a little bit more than the field is over against Houston. But let's talk about these Boston guards, Derek White, Jalen Brown, and Drew Holiday. Do you see yourself getting to one of these guys more than the other? Are any of them priorities?
I wouldn't say any of them are priorities. I did kind of like Derek White first look as a tournament guard play. This is the guy that's just been putting up really good numbers this year. Kind of took a big step up from last year for the Celtics. So I think he was the main guy I was really looking at. And then you can always take stabs at Holiday or Brown, but I think, at their respective price points, would prefer Derek White for me.
Yeah, Derek White's been, and it's weird to say because if you asked me before the season, I would have said it's probably going to be Drew Holiday. But Derek White has just been such a good fantasy producer, and he's doing much more than Drew Holiday is so far this season. He's coming in at 5% ownership on both sites. The 8,200 on FanDuel is probably a little uncomfortable because you can just pay a little bit more, get to Jalen Brunson or Damian Lillard. But the 7,400 on DraftKings versus Drew Holiday's 6,500 on DraftKings, both projected for less than 10% ownership. I'm okay mixing either one of them up. I still don't mind getting to Drew Holiday a little bit if it helps the rest of your lineup. But if you can find that extra $900, then I'm going to be a fan of Derek White today too. And then Jalen Brown back under 8K at only 12% ownership against the fastest team to ever play basketball. It's pretty intriguing.
Definitely.
Fred VanVleet was the other pay up guard that I'm kind of interested in, but it's pretty disappointing to see him so low in the OF index. I mean, he's lower than Jalen Green today. That's not something that we typically see. Still going to take shots on Fred VanVleet against Milwaukee. We like guards against Milwaukee, and so might mix up Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet in my lineups. We mentioned Kelly Oubre. I mean, even with Embiid in, this guy is showing up much higher than a couple of the other, I guess, like 2 other expensive guys, but still something to take note of. And I believe he is the top of the DK value today, along with Maxey McConnell. Halliburton still up there, top of value at the most expensive guard, so it's something to pay attention to. And then from the mid-range guys, was there anyone that you're taking a hard look at?
Yeah, so a couple of guys I think that are coming a little bit lower rounds. You mentioned Damian Lillard up top, but I think Chris Middleton in the mid
Mhm.
tier, he's priced up now. But in the first half of the last game, he was limited, but he had like 25 fantasy points in the first half. Probably was on pace to go for 45, maybe 50 fantasy points. He played that most of that second half. So I actually don't mind him in tournaments. Um, and then I shouldn't think anyone else. I guess Jalen Green, maybe you could take a stab at with no targets, and he does get a minor, just very small usage bump, more minutes. So I think he's fine to take stabs at as well.
And you mentioned Chris Middleton. It's like no one saw that coming, but apparently the team was aware of what the plan was, which is insane. Just tell us he's not going to play the second half. It's not going to affect the game plan. I mean, they were playing the Spurs, right? And it was much closer than it should have been. But Chris Middleton, kind of chalky on FanDuel at 21%, 7,200. I understand that. 4% on DraftKings. And like I'm going to say with a bunch of players, the 7,500 might seem a little uncomfortable, but we're getting a guy with a pretty good ceiling at 4%. it seems like the minutes restriction is gone. If I'm not mistaken, he's been playing typically 31 to 33 minutes. Yeah, right in that 32, 33 minute range. And 33 minutes from Chris Middleton, 7,500. It's a 4 game slate. There's not very many low owned guys that we're super interested in. I think it's okay to take some shots on him. And then Chris Dunn showing up kind of high towards the top of value at true value piece, 4,400 and 5K, around 13 to 15% ownership. Between him and Colin Sexton, are you kind of interested in these guys against Philadelphia, especially if Embiid ends up sitting?
Yeah, I think they're both fine. The only thing is their guard minutes are very uncertain. We've seen Clarkson, close the game. We've seen a couple other guys, just mix around minutes with them. So I think they're fine as value. I think their minute floor is a little bit, not too safe.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And Chris Dunn is showing up as the best Utah value guard, but I might just take shots on TJ McConnell. Now, if you played him yesterday, you kind of got lucky that he played the last 20 minutes of the game in a row or something like that. Got the entire fourth quarter blowout run, had a fantastic game. He was in winning lineups everywhere. Surprised to see him projected for 3% ownership. That seems a little bit incorrect. I would be shocked if he came in as low as 3%. And if that was the case, I'd be more interested in him. But we do have to realize that if we're playing TJ McConnell, we're really banking on that blowout run. Yeah, it's possible for him to get there in regular time, but the value in TJ McConnell comes from just finishing the game when when the Pacers are up by 30 or whatever it was. But at 3% ownership, he could get there in regular time. I wouldn't mind taking shots, but I would expect maybe even 10% plus.
Yeah, I think it's just more that point guard isn't the best, and he's probably one of the only values we kind of feel comfortable with. I don't know. I agree with you. I was kind of tilted. The blowout run last night was very much a bail. Halliburton was on pace to go for like 60 plus. So, um, yeah, I think he's fine.
Like the tilting part to me was I was getting so much McConnell at the beginning of yesterday, and by lock, I don't think I had any McConnell, and I just had so much Halliburton, and it's like, all right, well, just listen to the model. And the model only has him projected for 19 minutes. Not sure he really has the potential to play much more than that, but just something to keep in mind that he's a pretty great value piece projected for only 19 minutes. And B. Don Middleton got hurt last game. Is he clear? So he didn't get hurt. They told us before the game he was going to be on a minutes restriction. They just didn't tell us that he was literally only going to play the first half. So it's just injury maintenance, just making sure that he's good to go. And that was a back-to-back, and so they just didn't want to run him full minutes. But as far as we know, Middleton's good to go. We haven't projected for 31 minutes. I could see him playing. I mean, we've seen 33 minutes from him recently. So give him a couple more minutes. He's going to go up in value just slightly. And then a couple other guards I wanted to mention, Jordan Poole and Tyus Jones. Jordan Poole, very, very frustrating player. He's been bad. They're going up against New York. It's tough matchup. I mean, we're targeting players against Washington. That's why we're so interested in players like Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle today. But Tyus Jones and Jordan Poole, you like taking shots on them? Tyus Jones is more expensive than Poole on DraftKings. Not something I would have guessed at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, real quick with Poole, I just can't play them in. Like, I would love to play him, right? Like, he's just so cheap. Obviously, on Golden State, he was a different player, but he's been so bad. And then with Tyus Jones, like, he's more expensive, but he's just been way more consistent, right? So I think it's warranted. So I think I'd rather take a stab at Tyus Jones than Jordan Poole.
Yeah, Tyus Jones, true point guard, doesn't have to rely completely on scoring to get there, where Jordan Poole probably just has to put up 30 real life points to be in the winning lineup tonight, right? He's not doing much in terms of anything else. But the other cheap guard I wanted to talk about on Washington is Delon Wright. And I played way too much Delon Wright yesterday. He had a good game, put up 22 fantasy points, but just due to the other options on the slate, he wasn't really a tournament winner. But I mean, 16 to 18 minutes, it's not something we should have a lot of confidence in. But 3,500, we have some value options today, more than we would expect on any other 4-game slate. I mean, he had 5 steals yesterday too. But I don't mind taking shots on Delon Wright today.
Yeah, Wright's he's a good fantasy producer. I will note though, I think he did get most of the ball run in that Cavs game in the fourth quarter, but I liked him still. I still like him as a play today too. Just a pretty good fantasy producer. So
yeah, I mean, we haven't projected for 17 minutes, and similar to TJ McConnell, I don't know that he has the potential to really play much more than that. But I mean, 3,500, if he makes the rest of your lineup work, I mean, I'm seeing Jaden Springer pulling 17 and 10% ownership. And I don't know, maybe Jaden Springer's a play today, but I feel like I would rather just play Delon Wright, who I know is a better NBA player. I mean, Jaden Springer has gotten there like twice this season. If he ends up playing 20 minutes, 3,100, I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good fantasy producer. Gonna come down to, if Embiid's out, maybe we could look to more Springer. I don't. It's tough. Point guard is just like value is like you're kind of like trying to predict which guy gets there in their minutes. It's tougher. I mean, I think it's tough to predict the value at guard today.
Yeah, and so I mentioned the other Utah guards. Jordan Clarkson, 6,300, still on DraftKings, coming in for 6% ownership. Another boomer bust guy, but if he's only going to come in for 6%, this is a guy who has pretty good potential to put up 40 plus fantasy points on any given night, especially if Philadelphia does end up being more shorthanded than we already expect him to be. Projected for 27 minutes. I'd like to see what his minutes have looked like recently. He had that the first Jazz triple double in like 100 years or something a couple nights ago, but doesn't need a triple double to get there. Had a terrible game last game, but I mean he played 38 in that game when in the game after the triple double, and so that was overtime, right? But I mean, 27 minutes. He has potential to play a few more. I'd say like 32 is probably the top cap. But Jordan Clarkson at 6% seems like a really good tournament play today over on DraftKings.
Yeah,
And
and yeah, I think he's a good term.
And last guy I wanted to mention, Quentin Grimes, 3,200, showing up as chalk over on DraftKings. Quentin Grimes is never a guy we're excited to play. Very poor fantasy producer. So he played 24 minutes in the previous game in a super blowout. Put up 37 fantasy points. Was this yesterday? Like, that's insane. 37 fantasy points is more than double. He's had one game where he's gotten half of that this so far this season. And so Quentin Grimes being chalk is not something that we're really ever going to be really interested in, I don't think. I feel like we can just find some of the other cheaper guys, even Jaden Springer, Delon Wright. Pat Beverly doesn't get blowout run, and so in the event of a blowout, I'd probably still prefer the other cheap options. But even like TJ McConnell seems better. And so Quentin Grimes, if he makes your lineup work at 3,200, sure. But it's a guy that I'm probably going to try to avoid today and end up under that 24% that the field's getting to.
Yeah, he like just doesn't. As long as the game is close, like I don't really see a big ceiling from him. So I'm gonna probably be way under what as well. I'm not a huge fan of him as a DFS player or a real life player. So I'll be underweight too.
And the model strongly agrees with us. Quentin Grimes with the lowest OF index I've ever seen of a rotation player. And just looking at the DK value from the guys projected for ownership, it's just so much different than the rest of the guys we're looking at. And he's cheaper than all of them. And so the model is telling us that Quentin Grimes, not a great play. I mean, he's 3,200. If he makes your lineup work and you're not comfortable with the other guys, sure. But other than that, I would probably try and avoid him today. And then beat on in the chat, Miles McBride. So the problem is just that Miles McBride doesn't have any kind of guaranteed minutes where we know Quentin Grimes is going to see the court for, I don't know, at least 17 minutes a night ish. Miles McBride got there in the blowout last night as well. And so it's just not a guy that I'm going to be comfortable with. And with that said, he's projected for 4% ownership at the flat minimum on DraftKings and 3,600 on FanDuel. I feel like I'd rather just pay a little bit more and get to Delon Wright or Jaden Springer, who the model likes much more.
Yeah, it's just like I think we targeted McBride when Grimes was actually out. So like with Grimes in too, I think it just fully makes him out of play for me. Unless you like are building for a blowout, then maybe you can consider him.
And with this game only being a 9-point spread, I don't think I'm building for a blowout in any of these games tonight. Like, sure, any of these games could blow out tonight, realistically. But it's just if I'm banking on Miles McBride getting the last 6 minutes of blowout run to make my lineup, then it's just seems like I'm probably gonna not have a great night most of the time.
Exactly.
And then moving on to so Miles McBride is the backup point guard after the trade, but just I mean, if he gets 18 minutes, sure. I mean, price he could be a value. Put up 7 fantasy points that night, but the 15 he put up last night in 15 minutes. I'm sorry, the 24 fantasy points he put up last night in 15 minutes. It just like we're really banking on him to get the blowout run, and I don't want to predict a blowout even against the second worst team in the NBA. And so if that's something you want to do in your hand building, it's not the worst thing. If like you're at the max salary cap, you have 3,000 left, and he's the last player in. But most situations, it's just the guy I'm going to avoid in my lineups tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Yeah.
And looking at the forwards, we got Giannis Antetokounmpo right at the top of the OF index. Big gap, and then after him, Jason Tatum, Julius Randle, Kristaps, Jaylen Brown, Lauri Markkanen, Chris Middleton, and we'll throw Kyle Kuzma into that stud mix. So we already mentioned we're kind of interested in Julius Randle. Of these other guys, who are you looking at the most?
Yeah, so Julius Randle and I think Josh Hart projecting for 40% on DraftKings. It's going to be tough to avoid him as well. Great matchup here against Washington. The price point doesn't really make sense at 4,500. So definitely Josh Hart and Randle. And then we already mentioned Marcus Morris, especially if we're going to get a chalky Grimes. I think I'd just rather play Morris. So I really like Morris as well in terms of forwards.
Yeah, and Josh Hart, Marcus Morris, number 2 and number 3 on the DK value. Projected for some pretty hefty ownership, and Josh Hart super went off yesterday. Had the highest plus minus of the NBA season thus far, and happened to also put up a huge fantasy score. He played 30 minutes. We can probably expect close to 30 minutes with this new rotation the Knicks are running. And at 4,500, yeah, it's too cheap. I mean, even if he puts up that 25 fantasy points he put up a couple games ago, we're still going to be pretty happy with that. And with him being the super chalk, it's probably going to end up in a winning lineup if that happens. Marcus Morris, it's uncomfortable. It's 2024 now, and we're still talking about Marcus Morris in DFS, which is just insane, right? But I mean, we have him projected for 22 minutes. I mean, especially if Embiid's out, they could just run Marcus Morris at center. If Paul Reed's doing poorly, I know they've mixed in Mo Bamba recently too. But I mean, Marcus Morris hasn't been completely awful at this price tag, 3,500. Doesn't necessarily need to get over 30 minutes to get there. So Marcus Morris, unfortunately, is probably going to be a decent chunk of my exposures tonight.
Yeah, and the only other forward I think they could play for Harris, who is Daniel House, may see a little bit of run. I just think Morris finds his way onto the court more than House does because Morris can play the 5 or the 4. So I think Morris probably is more likely than on the court more than House.
And he is a model approved play, unlike the other couple of the other cheap guys we were talking about. So more interested in playing him. Kelly Oubre, we already talked about, is the top of DK value. And Courtney in the chat, does value score mean like 5-6x? The DK value, so you can't just look at a value score and be like, all right, this guy has a 14 value score today. He's a good play. It's always relative to what else is available on that particular slate. It doesn't relate to like 5-6, like kind of, I guess. It's just, this is directly based off the price. DK value, price with minutes, directly affects the DK value, where the OF index is not price sensitive for NBA. So when we're looking at DK value, it's basically just points per dollar. And like I said, the absolute values don't really mean much unless you're comparing it to the other options on the slate. And so just the model thinks Kelly Oubre, Josh Hart, Marcus Morris, Tatum and Brown are the top point per dollar plays on the slate today at small forward and power forward positions. We have a few studs in here after these 3, cheap-ish value guys, I guess. Tatum, Brown, Antetokounmpo, Randle. And I'm going to be interested in Randle. We already talked about Giannis. It's not that hard to fit him in today. We have enough cheap value, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have McConnell and then Springer and some other cheap guys. Yeah, I mean, Giannis against Houston, like he's 12K. I wouldn't say Houston's like a phenomenal matchup, but I don't think it's like too hard of a matchup either. So I think he's fine if you're not getting to Randle. I think getting up to Giannis definitely makes sense.
And I mean, Chris Dunn apparently has small forward eligibility on DraftKings. Not sure why. He's a point guard, but he's still showing up pretty high as a value under forwards. Kristaps, Lauri Markkanen a little bit lower. Middleton we both like. John Collins is someone I've been interested in. It's just his minutes have been kind of weird, but 4,800 on DraftKings, power forward center eligible, projected for 17% ownership. I'm bit interested there. And then another guy I was talking about was someone earlier, Danwell House on the Sixers, 3,300 and 3,600. Were you looking at him at all today?
Yeah, so I think he's kind of technically the direct backup for Harris. I still think he's fine, but definitely a guy that's probably going to be reliant off his shots, particularly the three pointer. So I still think he's fine. I think I prefer other guys around him. I think they're just better fantasy producers and not totally relying off you know the shot. So I think he's fine. I just won't be there as much as the field.
Yeah, I think if you're playing smaller field tournaments tonight, you don't really have to worry about Danwell House. But in the large field GPPs, I mean, being reliant on the shot, maybe he hits three threes or something. I don't know. Puts up 14 fantasy points, and just the 3,300 salary helps you put the rest of your lineup together. Ends up in the winner somehow. There's a lot of these mid-range forwards that we're interested in today. Basically, everyone on this list right here: Cam Whitmore and who's the other guy on Houston? Jay Tate, Jabari Smith, Jeff Green. Were you? I mean, these guys are predicted for pretty low ownership on DraftKings, a little bit more on FanDuel. Were you looking at any of these Houston guys?
Not really. I mean, kind of a tough matchup here for Houston against Milwaukee, particularly in the forwards up against Giannis, Lopez, Middleton. So not really for me.
Okay. And then just take a quick look at the FanDuel value. Kelly Oubre still at the top. Chris Middleton, 7,200. Second to Kelly Oubre. And then we got Jalen Smith still at 5K on both sides. Now, Jalen Smith being a center only on FanDuel. I usually don't love that. It's only a 4-game slate, so we have less starting centers today, but projected for 4 and 6% ownership on both sites. I mean, he hasn't been great. I will say I prefer Obi Toppin today to Jalen Smith if we want to take some GPP shots. Model doesn't agree with me, but 7%, 3% ownership, he's been pretty great. And even with if Naismith is in, still like Obi Toppin, especially if he actually plays the 25 minutes, it's surprising to me that he's projected so low on the OF index and DK value score and FD value score for that matter. But don't mind taking shots on Obi Toppin today. And then you asked me about Benedict Mathurin before the stream. 5,400 on FanDuel sounds much better than the 5,900 on DraftKings. Are you going to get there?
Yeah, I think without Bruce Brown, 5,900 and 5,400 definitely prefer on FanDuel. I don't love it because he is mostly shot reliant, but without Bruce Brown, he should see more minutes here. Again, not a great matchup, not a guy I really want to heavily get exposure to, but I definitely want to take stops there with Mathurin, I think.
Yeah, he's like we've been talking about his minutes are just so volatile that if he's playing poorly, you might only see 21 of his 27 projected. If he's playing really well, he could see 30 plus. And so maybe it just depends on how Rick Carlisle's feeling this day or feeling today. And Boston's probably the best team in the NBA, but I don't really care about that as much when we're talking about these super low on plays that just have an outside chance of getting there, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
definitely just kind of stab with him.
and Dante DiVincenzo of Josh Hart, same price on Yahoo. Let's take a look at these guys. So Dante DiVincenzo's starting. I mean, Dante's 11 on Yahoo. Josh Hart's $10 on Yahoo, which is the minimum price over there. They both seem like fine plays to me. I don't think that I'd have a super preference. I mean, going by Yahoo value, that $1 matters a little bit, I guess. Josh Hart shows up a little bit higher on the value score. But they're probably both going to be pretty good plays at the flat minimum over there, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
And then moving on to centers, let's take a look here. Giannis center eligible on DraftKings. Not a day where there's for sure a center we want to play, but I still don't think he's going to end up in my center spot too much. We'll have to wait for word on Joel Embiid. Maybe we're not going to get that news before the stream ends. I'll be in the Discord right after this, and so instructions in the description below if you want to get in there doing another Q&A, basically just saying the same stuff, but maybe we'll have more information to work with in I don't know, 30 minutes or so. Then after that, Kristaps, Sengun, Brook Lopez, and Isaiah Hartenstein, who's probably going to end up being my highest exposed center. He's the highest projected ownership of any center today. I think you said you were pretty interested in Hartenstein today, but are there any other guys that you're taking a hard look at?
Yeah, so Hardenstein and Embiid, if he plays, probably the guys I'll probably be most exposed to. And it looks like Alperen Sengun projecting for pretty hefty ownership, around 25%. Don't love the matchup against Milwaukee, but You expect if Houston's going to make a really close game, Sengun's the main reason why. So I think he'd be a guy I want to get probably around or maybe a little bit over the field on Sengun. And then I actually want to mention Kristaps. I know they're fully healthy, but at 8K, forward eligibility as well on DraftKings, I definitely want to get overweight to Kristaps at his ownership too.
I agree with you there. Yeah, the 8,100 on Kristaps looks good. We were talking about all the other guard options. Jason Tatum too showing up near the top of the OF index, but Porzingis seems great today. Good spot. I mean, we want to target good players against Indiana, and we're getting one. Basically, all of Boston's coming in too low. Oh no! So I think just being overweight on Boston, period, and figuring out which positions you don't like. I don't know. I guess you don't like the other value in, and just plug those Boston guys into those positions. And then you mentioned Sengun. I was so interested in him. I was so disappointed to see his ownership come in so high. I thought he was going to be a low owned GPP play that I could sneak in today, but I guess not. And he has a decent OF index, but we kind of see that the model thinks his DK value isn't as good as these other guys. He is a little bit more expensive, but points per dollar, maybe just be slightly less interested in him. But I mean, are there any other centers that you're looking at to take GPP shots on?
And it's tough. Paul Reed, if Embiid sits,
Mm-hmm.
you can maybe consider at 57 just for maybe comes in lower rounds. But yeah, really tough to really prioritize anyone after those guys we mentioned. So
Yeah, and if Joel Embiid does get ruled out, just it kind of shifts the slate a little bit. I still don't think Paul Reed's going to come in with the ownership that he deserves. Maybe the 5,700, 5,600 price scares some people off, but I mean Utah, yeah, they have Walker Kessler, but we still don't mind playing bigs against Utah. And Paul Reed is just a really good GPP play, and because he's failed the field a few times this season, I think people are kind of nervous to get there. And so Paul Reed is a guy I will probably be over the field on no matter what he comes in at, assuming Joel Embiid is out. And then Brooke Lopez, model darling, guy is showing up near the top every day. Today we're getting him at 3% ownership on DraftKings, 6,400. 7K on FanDuel, it's a little bit higher, but he has like a 7 block game or something, 6% over there. We don't mind that, but as of right now, I think I agree with you. Yeah, Hartenstein and Embiid are the centers that I'm taking the hardest look at, that I'm getting to the most.
definitely, I mean, I don't love just playing the chalk, but I mean, they seem like such clear plays here that it's hard to avoid them.
And we mentioned a bunch of like lower owned value plays. I'm just going to go ahead and move the slider. Let's do like super value. So 4,500, and let's sort by DK value. And we know we're interested in Josh Hart. Marcus Morris, I could go either way. The model's in, so I guess I should be a little bit more in. But like TJ McConnell, Chris Dunn, Denwell House, Whitmore, Batum, these guys are all coming in pretty low. Like everyone else is coming in pretty low ownership. And then we get to Quentin Grimes here, and you could just avoid Quentin Grimes and hope to hit on one of these other cheap value plays, and you'll probably have an advantage on a quarter of the field. Pat Connaughton projected for 0% ownership. I don't know if it was you that we were talking about on a previous stream, but was it you who just can't get to Pat Connaughton, or are you at all interested in him today?
Is he still on a minutes limit? I don't. He was like they weren't rushing him back, so I don't know. Like he just seems like with like potential maybe a minor minutes cap. I don't know if we have the upside with him to really play him today. I mean, I don't know. Probably not for me.
Well, we haven't predicted for 21 minutes. He played 28 in the previous game against the Spurs. That was a close game. Now, he did start the second game for Middleton, or the second half for Middleton. So I wouldn't expect 28 minutes again, but we've seen 24, 23, 22, 18 minutes from him over the last however many games. And at 0% ownership, especially if we're fading Quentin Grimes, he's a little bit more expensive than Quentin Grimes, but don't mind taking shots over on Connaughton. And yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of value options. Delon Wright, even Jaden Springer, Obi Toppin's still pretty cheap over on DraftKings. Isaiah Jackson is in for Indiana, I believe, coming in at 4% ownership. He is center only, but I don't think that there's very many centers we're super interested in today, so it's not really a problem today. And then, I don't know, everyone else down here, kind of just guys like Corey Kispert, Aaron Holiday, and Pat Bev are all pulling some ownership on both sites. Not sure I'm really going to get to many of them, but on a 4-game slate, we should be more interested in these guys than we are on like yesterday's huge slate where these guys were still pulling ownership. Corey Kispert was anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, let's go ahead and put together a dummy before we get out of here. Just want to keep it kind of simple today. So you cool just starting with the top values over on the model, Kelly Oubre, Hartenstein, and Hart.
That sounds perfect to me.
All right, let's throw in Kelly Oubre at the small forward position. Hart. Actually, let's throw Kelly Oubre in at the small shooting guard position. We'll throw Hart in at small forward. Kelly Oubre.
Shooting
And
guard's pretty
then,
bad too. So
yeah, shooting guard has typically been the position that I have the hardest time filling. I mean, we do have some decent options today: Middleton, Brown, Derek White, Jalen Green, who I'm never excited about playing, but his price is pretty good for a GPP play, and then Jordan Clarkson. After that, it gets kind of a. After that, it's basically everyone's just GPP plays, right?
yeah, definitely.
So we'll
And
throw
hard to
Hart
sign probably.
in. Mm-hmm. And is there another player you're thinking of to get to next, maybe outside the model, or Tyrese Maxey?
I think I was just about to say Maxey. If we assume Embiid sits, let's get Maxey in there. They're already down Melton and Harris too.
Yeah. Do you want to? Should we build this as if Embiid is sitting? Because
We can do that.
even if Embiid's in, and so I do want to throw Paul Reed in here, and this is probably not part of like to me it should be part of the core if Embiid sits, but we'll call it more GPP ish since we're a little bit unsure right now. But that leaves us 6,600 per position. So was there another stud? I mean, we were talking about Brunson and Randall.
I'm good with either one. I think Randall, I really like today. Bigs against Washington kind of goes along with Hartenstein. So I'm good with either. It's up to you.
I'm curious. Well, okay. Let's. What position are we trying to fill in? Like, is guard? Are we gonna have an easier time finding a guard or a power forward? I mean, guard. Let's try this. Jordan Clarkson, Julius Randle, and it leaves us 4,700 at forward. We have no shortage of value today. 100 off from a GPP play, John Collins. We didn't mention Koulibaly, but this dude has been playing some minutes recently, and at 4,600, is he pulling any ownership today? I don't think Koulibaly
I
is
think
the
he
guy that
was
I
cool.
mind today. Oh yeah, 17 and 30%. That's a decent amount of ownership, but I still don't mind him.
He's fine. Yeah, with no shame, he's fine for sure.
Yeah, if I was like building my dummy lineup, I'd probably personally throw an Obi Toppin in there, but we have a few options here, and they all seem fine. You could take out Clarkson and maybe throw in. I don't know. Can we get up to like a Derek White 3,600? We have all the cheap value. Cam Whitmore, Marcus Morris works.
Yeah,
Even with
definitely.
four Philly guys, we're not running it back with a Utah guy on days where we have like kind of weird extreme value. I think it's okay. If you can find a Utah guy to run it back with, that's good too, though.
Yeah, and like Philly's really depleted. Like they cares Melton, potentially no Embiid. Like these guys are all going to play a ton of minutes. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, just figuring out which of these value guys to target. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, like I'm not sure what kind of rules I'm going to set. There's probably going to be something. I mean, if Covington is out too, then I think that makes it easier. It's one less decision that we have to make. But like if Covington's in, I'd probably set max one of Morris and Covington, maybe max one of Daniel House and Jaden Springer.
Yeah.
Maybe throw
I was
Pat
going to
Bev
ask.
in it. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe. But I was going to ask you about Nicolas Batum. He's the one guy we haven't mentioned for Philly. Do you have any interest there? I don't personally, but he's another value guy.
It's like we should never be interested in Nicolas Batum when he's above 4K. I mean, the model thinks these guys like Marcus Morris is a much better value, and we're saving some money on DraftKings anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree.
39% on FanDuel for Batum, man. Like, what are we doing? It seems insane to me. Just want to try something real quick. Let's turn the FanDuel slider down to call it 5K. Just see what the values look like. Like I'm pretty sure Batum is a value we can. Okay, so in terms of 5K values on FanDuel, the model actually likes Batum as one of the better ones at just 4K, and so not quite as hard of a fade as Quentin Grimes. Quentin Grimes still way down here. It's not as chalky on FanDuel, but
Yeah, and I think Covington out would make Batum look better. If Covington in, I might be lower on Batum. We'll have to monitor that news with him.
Yeah, and we have Batum projected for 23 minutes. It's going to be tough to say, especially if Embiid ends up in or out. We're not sure, but it seems like either way, Marcus Morris is going to be safer on DraftKings, and then
Yeah,
given that he's coming in at half the ownership of Batum on FanDuel, I don't think I mind that pivot either. Because just like you said, like Batum, the chalkiest dude on the slate, like what are we doing? There's 4 games.
he's old. I don't know. I didn't know him either. So
Yeah, these FanDuel ownerships today. I mean, there's some good stuff going on, but I mean, let's just sort by value real quick. Jalen Smith at 6%. If you can, find the courage to play him. I mean, Chris Middleton a little bit lower owned. Kelly Oubre top of value on both sides. I think we should be very, very interested in him. And then we have a couple guys pretty close to 10% ownership down here. If we want to avoid some of these super chalk guys, so would we include Pritchard in cheap guard pool? So my problem with Pritchard is I'm only interested in playing him usually if Derek White or Drew Holiday is out. And today the Boston is at full strength, 4,300 and 4,600. If we didn't have a ton of those other value options, then maybe. But for me, it just like the path to Pritchard getting there today is he comes in, hits a few threes, gets blowout. Are you looking at Pritchard today?
I don't think so. It is a good matchup, but with all these guys healthy, we would really need blowout, and I just don't expect that here. So probably not for me. No, it is a good matchup though.
Because it's like if he puts up on a lot of slates, if we're short on value for 4,300 on DraftKings, if we get like a 19, 23, 24, like we're pretty thrilled about that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas today, I don't know. I mean, Pritchard would have to put up 30 plus to kill us, I think. I will say that he's kind of a direct pivot to McConnell in a similar situation. So something to consider, but not probably not going to get to any Peyton Pritchard today. And then Precious Achua versus Washington. So as Precious Achua, let's see what his playing times look like before we get out of here. 3,900 on DraftKings, power forward center eligible. He's played 11 and 13 minutes in New York. So I mean, if you're like hand building and you are projecting a blowout in this game, then maybe Precious gets the blowout run. But 13 minutes. I'm curious. Do you know if he got the blowout run yesterday?
Let me check real quick. He may have. I assume he would, right? Because I don't see them playing him too many minutes, and
Okay, so
you
I'm
know,
seeing the rotation right now, and it looks like they still played OG Anunoby pretty deep into the fourth quarter, and Precious only came in for the last 3.5 minutes. He got a couple stints earlier in the game, but um, yeah, I don't know what they're doing there. So maybe it's possible he gets more. It's not something I want to bank on though, and so I think we have enough other guys,
mhm.
other cheap value that we might not have to take a look at Precious Chua today.
Yeah, him and
And
Grimes are just I just don't think we need to go there with those two.
yeah, I mean, Grimes checked in with 2 minutes left in the third quarter and then played basically the rest of the game where he did most of his work. But I don't know. It's hard to say fade a 3,200 guy who's chalk, but it could be an advantage. I mean, if he puts up like 6 or 7, then you have a leg up on the field still anyway. So, and then Kuzma for large field. I mean, I think my answer is usually Kuzma is always an okay GPP play. 77, yeah, when he's under 8K, I always view him as a fine GPP play, especially we're so interested in New York guys. If we, expect and hope the game stays close, it makes sense that Kuzma is a big part of that. And so I don't mind Kuzma for large field GPPs. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I always like Kuzma at low ownership. It seems like the perfect run back to the New York guys, like you mentioned. So yeah, really like Kuzma for tournaments, as always.
All right, guys. Well, if you have any more questions or anything, I will be in the Discord probably about 5 minutes from now. Instructions in the description below. Remember, let's say we get slate changing news like Embiid is out and you want to see an update of the model. You can sign up to the Occupy website. $7 a week comes down to $1 a day, and you get access to to the model and all the updates and everything. So appreciate everyone watching. We will be back tomorrow for our Sunday show, and good luck tonight.
Good luck tonight, guys.